going to someone's house, setting up a family with 60, 70 megabits per second and at a rate that they can afford, it's really just life-changing.
Welcome to episode 420 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. This is Rye Marketilio McCracken with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Today on the podcast, we welcome Deborah Simpier, CEO of Althea. Althea is a company offering services and software to make operating community networks easier. We talk about their approach, including the unique way they route traffic across the network based on changing costs and latencies. Althea networks are starting across the country as well as across the planet, in Africa and South America. Now here's Christopher talking with Deborah Simpier.
Welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. This is Christopher Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in St. Paul, Minnesota. Today I'm speaking with Deborah Simpier, the CEO of Althea. Welcome to the show, Deborah.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk about this approach, which is it's very interesting. I think I know I see it popping up in my Twitter feed among people that follow this show and follow our writings. It's something that I know Jane Coffin and others are very excited about at Internet Society in terms of how Althea is creating new opportunities in wireless networking in particular. But if we start off really quickly, what is the sort of 30-second pitch for what is Althea?
So Althea, in a nutshell, is software and tools that empower communities to be able to both build quickly and maintain sustainable networks. And I think that's kind of the big piece here is that missing is that we oftentimes approach these things with the build and don't look at how we can work together as communities to kind of address that long-term sustainability piece for our low income and rural communities.
Okay, so we're definitely going to come back to talk about sustainability. I think that's really important. And I have to say, looking at you, you look young enough that I'm not sure that you were around participating in the Wi-Fi bubble of 15 years ago. But sustainability wasn't a successful part of that effort to build wireless networks. I want to come back to sustainability, but for someone who's never heard of Althea, what exactly does it do? So you mentioned it's software. So what exactly does it provide?
So the software component of it is really interesting because we sort of look at how we can change and really meet that economic problem. And the two core components of what we do are what we call a pay for forward model. So that means that instead of one company or one big monopoly owning all of the infrastructure of the network, the towers, the cabling, all of that, many different participants, business owners, a farm high up on the hill, or a homeowner in town can make up part of the infrastructure of the network, with antennas on the roof or with cables and relay bandwidth to their neighbors and get compensated for, being a part of the network, which means we can build networks together in a cost-effective way using private property instead of public right-of-way, which can be cumbersome and expensive, or, large, expensive, $20,000, $40,000 towers that are, overly prohibitive for smaller communities.
That's heresy. The idea that uncoordinated people could work together to form some kind of working network without some sort of centralization, how would that ever work?
Well, right. And I think, communities have been doing this for eons, right? They've been building cooperative infrastructure in many different ways. Certainly the rural electrical co-ops are a great example of that.
Well, I'm sorry to jump in, but I mean, I'm sometimes just totally my dry sense of humor or lack of sense of humor. I mean, that's what you just described as how the internet works, of course. Right. And so there's a very good model for it, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that's it in a nutshell. Is like, well, that's how can we streamline this, right?
Sure. So let's come back to that in a second. And let me ask you how you got into this.
Well, and I think this is a story that's going to resonate with everyone, or at least folks in rural communities for sure. But so I've been a small business owner of a managed service and computer repair shop for about the last 15 years in my rural community of about 2,000 people. About 5 years ago, there was a $1 million grant for this area. They built out some fiber. But, watching that kind of story unfold where it really did not meet the needs, we still have people 1 megabit per second, internet, the fiber still in our town is sold in 10 megabit per second packages. So we had this system that even though there was resources to come in and kind of build the initial build, we still did not meet the needs of the roughly 500 households in this area. From that is where we kind of got started working on Althea. And my personal background is also one who is very interested in like net neutrality and freedom of the internet activism. And I got very heavily involved in that when the debate was, kind of at its forefront. And, just seeing that all unfold, I think really brought to light that perhaps the way that we can kind of change and keep and hold these freedoms is not necessarily through legislative means or through regulatory means, but perhaps it is through, owning this infrastructure in a decentralized way. So this is kind of what also led me to, kind of get involved in this project and where my thinking around things are.
When you say get involved with the project, do you really mean start the project? I don't really have a sense of where it came from.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story too, and I think one that maybe many startups also can understand. So I had started working on what I called incentivized mesh nets. I thought, hey, if we align everybody's incentives, both the consumers and subscribers with the carriers, that we could really, make a difference. And met Jahan Trumbeck and Justin Kilpatrick, who were working on actually the very first iteration of Althea, and started working together. So that's how we kind of met and started the project. They had actually started What is Althea before for me, as kind of from the development perspective. And I'm definitely the boots on the ground ham radio operator. We had been working on self-aiming antennas and easier to deploy towers and all of these kinds of things. And we ended up being a really great team and brought Althea to where it is today.
And so I want to come back to the sustainable element, and then we'll get into some of the actual deployments that are out there. But I started about 15 years ago myself in this field, and I one of the things that I learned, because I came in right as the Wi-Fi bubble was bursting, is this idea of the sustainable business model. And for people who weren't familiar in the audience, it was an exciting time where people thought the third pipe was going to come. There was going to be citywide Wi-Fi networks. And the problem was that the vendors oversold what the technology of the day could do. In many cases, you couldn't get a good signal inside the home. It was right also at the beginning of streaming video. And so at a time in which the equipment was underperforming, people's expectations were increasing significantly. So there was not anywhere near enough revenue because no one wanted to pay for the level of service that they were getting. I shouldn't say no one, but not enough to make a business plan cash flow. And then the business models crumbled, and some people use that as an excuse to say that municipal systems are failures, despite the fact it was a larger business model issue. But the idea of sustainability, I think, is important. And there's a lot of people who come into this and they say, all right, I'm going to embrace wireless because I don't have to do it the right of way, because it's something that I can do at low scale and we can build up. So what do you put in to make it more sustainable then, aside from, if you just posit like a group of people that are building a wireless network, how does adding Althea to that make it more sustainable?
Yeah, and I think to answer that question, we have to zoom out a little bit and look at how the internet is bought and sold right now. Right. So right now, internet is sold on a subscription-based model. So the incentive for a carrier is to provide you basically the worst possible service they can, the least amount of bandwidth for the highest price. Right. And then there's no incentive once you're in that contract or once you're kind of siloed into their service for them to add in more capacity, or in wireless capacity to change your antennas. There's no incentive for them, and it's actually almost a divergent incentive. So when we looked at it, we thought, why would you do it this way? You don't buy bananas as a subscription. You don't buy, go to the grocery store and buy your banana subscription. You buy bananas by the each. And so when we started to look at how we could treat bandwidth as a commodity and not only charge by the gigabyte, but in our routing protocol, we actually route based on price as well. So as these networks grow and become interconnected, the upstream provider for you and your home is going to change on a second by second basis based not only on, how good of quality and how, much bandwidth you're getting, but also on the cost. I have a really great story about a farmer who watches over his goats, if you don't mind a quick segue.
No, go for it.
So we have a slider bar on the router dashboard. So as your kind of dashboard, you can choose quality of connection or cost of connection. And the router will weight which upstream provider is chosen. So we have a farmer, during the day, he just wants to monitor his herd of goats, his does that are about ready to kid. And so he chooses the best cost for that connection, which is a little higher latency, but probably fine for watching over kidding does, and save some money. And then when he goes home in the evening to watch a movie, wants a little bit better ping or play a game, then just slides that over, and then the Althea router automatically chooses that better connection.
So let's assume for a second that I'm a goat herder, and I have neighbors who are both using Althea as well. One of them, charges more for perhaps a higher quality access, and my system can choose the route A or B for which one. And so in theory, there would be multiple over time. There's going to be more and more of those. And so I'm supposing that those people are also trading off based on how much capacity they're willing to share of their connection, because in theory, the more people that are using theirs, then the less they may have available to them for their own use. Is that right?
There's a little bit of nuance in that. In fact, the system itself is, we use queuing mechanisms to support almost like so the queuing mechanisms are at the router level, so that you always have the best, possible experience. So you have things like Zoom calls and go in front of larger downloads that are updates, right? Those kinds of things. But that's also, these queuing and traffic shaping things are put network wide as well. So the total amount of capacity for the entire network, or that connection can do will be available, and then balanced fairly between the users.
Now, I feel like you've just put yourself into a potential box for instance, if I had Will Reinhardt on here, a friend of mine who takes a less supportive view of net neutrality, for instance, he might say that you care a lot about open internet freedom, and yet I feel like you've just described a non-neutral network. So how do you reconcile that?
The actual content of the network is completely encrypted in our local networks and only actually gets decrypted outside of the physical network itself and in an IX, right? So an internet exchange. So the actual, none of the actual content of the network. So we're looking at the types of packets, right? Not necessarily the content of the network. So you won't have a situation where Netflix has a greater priority than Comcast or something like that, or HBO streaming, right? So the content's very neutral, and that's very important to us.
Great. Yeah, that's what I was hoping you'd say. I didn't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it's interesting too, because as we zoom out, some of our emerging markets are very focused on what they can do for caching and, allowing some types of content through. And I think that there's definitely some interesting opinions around, whether it makes sense to provide free educational content. But I feel like the internet is so big and amazing, and we all get different, different values from it, and to sort of box and say, this is the kind of education that you should have is very difficult for us to support.
Now, the way you've described it, when I was first learning about Althea, I wasn't sure if, for instance, I, as a Comcast customer myself, if I could start a local network and I would be the endpoint and people would use my bandwidth. But that doesn't sound like how you're setting it up.
Correct. So Althea networks or the software is for people setting up community-based networks, right? Local networks, whether that's a small business, an existing ISP can use our software and tools, or that's a community or nonprofit network. Many of our networks are in fact set up as legal cooperatives, which is a structure that works very well. But we envision this, or these networks are all set up with wholesale backhaul. So you want a dedicated source that's resellable. And then within the network itself, it organizes. So if you can kind of imagine that, in fact, the internet actually should be an entire open access network where people can add capacity, and then it balances between that. That's the vision. And, but we definitely get there through wholesale.
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting. I mean, I think when we talk about local community networks and things like that, there's a variety of approaches, but your approach really relies on people that have done the legal legwork and are taking, I don't want to say taking it seriously, because I don't want to disrespect people who are very seriously building other types of community networks. But it is an approach that is, I would say, like, is quite professional. It's not just for a group of neighbors that get together and they want to do something on the spur of a moment.
Yeah, I think that we all recognize that the internet is a valuable resource, and that it's important for our neighbors to be able to have that kind of reliability, and that they expect and that we need. In many cases, this is our access to healthcare, it's our access to education, and we have a lot of training and support for our communities and our networks to be able to operate these professionally, and to install safely, and to keep their networks up and running reliably.
So let's talk about one of the deployments. What's your favorite one?
Well, they're all like children. It's hard to pick my favorite. However, we set up our first network here in my community, and being able to see that firsthand, and see the transition between just having a network that was less expensive and faster and really met those basic needs, to watching people, put in infrastructure themselves and to be involved and own and really feel that ownership of the network was, rewarding and amazing. And there's really nothing like going to someone's house where they had a megabit per second or no internet at all, setting up a family with 60, 70 megabits per second and at a rate that they can afford, it's really just life-changing.
Now, this is something that I would say that I didn't appreciate until I saw one of the Internet Society community networks being built in Hawaii. And just, I think, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, I mean, I feel like you take a family that may or may not have much technical expertise, and you tell them we're going to put an antenna on your house. It seems like they embrace it, and they're enthusiastic about learning the technology in ways that they may not be if you just say, I'm going to throw a modem in your basement and just ignore it, and you can use the internet. Yeah,
absolutely. One of my favorite stories actually just happened recently in another network, where they had only CenturyLink DSL, and appreciated what they did have, but it was 4 megabits per second on a good day. People weren't able to work or do school from home, and seeing the local community members build this network. I mean, we built incredibly quickly in 4 weeks. One of the community members actually was very excited. He was a ham radio operator, already had some understanding of wireless, went out and, trenched and put up a 16-foot pole himself. And then he built this, it's a telecom box, but it was like the stone soup of telecom boxes, because it was repurposed roofing tiles and hand stained wood. It's beautiful. It has this feet that's off the ground. It was, and all the kind of community, it was repurposed from like all community members bringing, they had maybe some chains, and this person had the roofing tiles, and then it's like a little router house that was built from the community coming together, bringing materials together, and built that. And then he's now getting 120 megabits per second, like 50 megabits per second up. So definitely changed his world, and he was also very excited to be giving back to the community. He's one of our key relays there.
And so how does this work then? Let's say that I want to do this in St. Paul, and I want to use Althea. How do I go about interfacing with you, getting the wholesale, and figuring out what role different people have? How does all that work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think I want to just quickly highlight that there are only 1,600 ISPs in all of the U.S., and that seems like a big number. there are like 9,000 Boost mobile stores. So, which speaks to me that it's much more difficult to run an ISP than it is to, just start up a mobile phone store. So we really have tried to eliminate much of the friction of all of the pieces of running a network.
And if you don't mind me saying, I mean, even at the height of ISPs in the late 90s, I think we were at like 7,500. And so the Boost stores still would have outnumbered the number of ISPs in the height of the 90s.
Yeah,
which was
absolutely
a long time ago when we had a lot of competition at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recognize that there is a lot of friction points around the technical pieces of operating a network. And so we took a lot of that complexity and basically offer full service consulting. So we help you with your RF design. We can help you get that sort of DIA or backhaul, which is its whole other nuanced process. And then we have our network operations center that's always available for tier 1 support. So really through that, and we also have supply line, we can help you with get your gear. And then we have a customer CRM funnel, marketing materials that are standardized that you can use, and a really great supportive community where we have ongoing support and calls that help with the outreach process and all of that. So really all of the kind of technical complexity and things that would really be a friction point to local networks, we're there to help through that whole process. So first of all, we have folks fill out a proposal, and then from there we can kind of take and help you design and build your network.
So if I did that, then you might say, okay, well, in St. Paul, we know that you can get good wholesale at these locations, and here's recommendations on where you put your antennas and things like that, and sort of walk me through it. Now one of the things that seems like a fairly standard, consultant kind of package rule, but one of the things that's unique about your approach is that then also any customers or subscribers that are using it, they themselves then can get credits. And so how does that come together in terms of how they get credits for the store and forward and things like that? Not store and forward, but the forwarding.
Yeah, so that all happens automatically. So essentially, as the routing protocol chooses its routes, we have a billing program that's built in called RITA that automatically counts how many gigabytes that you forwarded to neighboring clients. And again, remember, this is all encrypted, so there's no place there where anyone can man in the middle or see any of your data. And then those credits are automatically paid to you, so that we use a digital stable currency called XDAI that is pegged to the dollar. So basically, some of our clients who have maybe 10 or 15, or relays that have 10 or 15 maybe subscribers downstream, they usually get about anywhere between $50 to $70 worth of XDAI a month.
And so the reason for that is in part then, so you have people who are willing to put up relays to extend the network, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things too is important about our model is that we also do have a monthly subscription fee that comes out, not only just the pay for use. So that pays for your local, what we call them operators, but that is your local cooperative or your small business. Like for example, in Enfield, it's Wave 7 Communications, and they help the relays. They come with crew members to install your relay for you and help you with all that technical support. So relays don't have to be technically knowledgeable, nor do they necessarily have to contribute any of their own resources, although they often do.
Right, and you just mentioned Enfield, which is in North Carolina, one of the Althea networks.
Yeah, that's a really exciting story too. That area has been, I think, suffering from lack of proper internet access for a long time. And we just recently deployed our beginning infrastructure there to starting at what we call it the gateway. That's where the fiber comes in and where you have antennas that, broadcast to the rest of the community. And that's right there at the Enfield Library with support. We use the bucket trucks from the local community. I think that's either the city or the utility district there. And then we have free, park and access Wi-Fi there right at the library. And then we're supporting the library with free internet access. So, to see the community support around this model is really exciting.
And is this something that, is it attracting a certain type of person? Is it like a more technical like person, entrepreneurial person? I mean, or is this just people who are like, look, I just need to solve this problem? Like what unites your clients?
I think it's a little bit of a mix. We definitely have seen since COVID more municipalities, county commissioners, and sometimes tribal governments looking at this model. Especially since some of those communities, maybe you have like we hope to deploy late summer in this community called Plush and 8L. There's 100 households tops, where this is a really great model even for municipalities. And then for so then there's the entrepreneurial folks that are also community minded. One of the kind of big keys here is the social capital. So it's much easier to deploy a community network if you are a part of your community.
Sure. Yeah. You may not get along with all your neighbors, but at least you have a sense of what you can trust them to do. And you do have a sense that you're all in it together, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think in every community there's, maybe a person who is a natural community leader, whether they're, president of the Rotary Club or they're involved in their church, or maybe it's a city mayor or whatever. We have these kind of broadband champions who can help coalesce and bring people together and support these projects.
Is this something that is only in the United States?
Oh, no, I'm so excited. Right. Well, so the internet doesn't have borders, so and our software doesn't either. It's just really exciting. So we have...
Hence the cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So people always say, well, why are you doing it weird? Why are you using digital blockchain-based currency instead of, like Stripe or something like that, right? So, but we do envision that this platform will be used universally, and the internet doesn't have borders, so why should our payment protocol? And we currently have networks in Nigeria. We have a small pilot in Ghana, but we have another new network going there pretty soon. We have someone on the way to Kampala, Uganda next week, who is bringing down and starting a new network there. And we have deployed some pilots in South America as well, and are looking forward to working actually with Kia Labs in Colombia here in the next couple of months as well. So, definitely we have a lot more international projects. Many emerging markets, or at least in the African spaces, a lot of them are mobile based, right? So in the US, we have a lot of fixed wireless, or we have, internet to the home with a router and that kind of thing. But there's primarily...
It's often building off of existing infrastructure, right? I mean, it's wires that were put in 100 years ago or something like that, or poles that were put in 100 years ago. So definitely different opportunities in places that haven't had that level of infrastructure investment yet.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why it's exciting, is if we can, take this greenfield and build something in a community-based model rather than, and sustainability, right, too. There's some other pieces of that come into this. So our routers also have the ability to be hotspots, right? Xfinity has kind of a similar model. You can do their Xfinity wireless, I believe, right, where you get the app on your phone and then you can roam around with it. So we have a similar model in Africa. And so people get an app on their phone, and then they can utilize these mobile hotspots, or anyone who has a fixed router in their home. And so what's exciting here is we have an economic model where a business owner there can get internet to their home or their business, pay the money for the equipment, and then basically in kind of a micro lending way start their internet cafe, right? Even within their home. And what's also exciting is that it empowers many women who are to start their own kind of internet cafes within their home, or put a hotspot out near the school, or whatever that looks like.
And that would work by their neighbors would then come over and pay them to access it, or that others would build a new antenna and both those things, or
yeah, they operate as a fixed wireless type of node, right, where they're either like cabled to other houses, or they operate as just a Wi-Fi hotspot, either open air or something where you have a marketplace, or or sometimes we have one around a mosque, right? So people can gather there at the mosque and use the internet on their mobile phones. these kind of like outdoor Wi-Fi hotspots, or you have it where homeowners nearby can use their mobile phones if the signal's good enough.
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea. I was joking earlier that I was a little more by the seat of my pants here, but I had no idea the international reach of it. So I'm glad we went down that rabbit hole.
There's some interesting things around power sustainability, especially in Nigeria's very inconsistent power. So what we're working on right now is that kind of full package of sustainable energy, along with that kind of, so you're not only an internet hub, then you also are, sustainable power to keep that internet up and running in a clean way. Actually, many of the cellular towers and that kind of thing there are powered with diesel generators. So you just, walking through the streets and you see these black clouds and loud generators, right? And then you come into the Althea neighborhood, and the Althea neighborhood has these solar panels and community members, right? So much different approach to how we provide internet access. And I'm excited that, we could maybe have a solid footing in.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's an interesting model, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops both in the United States and outside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That was Christopher talking with Deborah Simpier. We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter. The handle is @muninetworks. Subscribe to this and other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. You can access them anywhere you get your podcasts. You can catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Arnie Hughesby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons. This was episode 420 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. Thanks for listening.